We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. I thank all of you for being here, wherever you may be, and of course, however you may be listening. We're back at it for another edition of a game preview. This week, it's Iowa at Maryland. Of course, if you're a Maryland fan, obviously, I am an Iowa Hawkeye fan. So much of my analysis is going to be geared in that direction with that in mind. But I will try and keep it as unbiased and factual. In fact, most of the video is going to be reviewing stats and numbers, which those have zero bias. But before I get into any of that, I want to just discuss and revisit the Iowa versus UCLA game a little bit, and kind of reflect on this season now that it's been a week since Iowa has played. It's going to be 2 weeks, or well, a week and some change when they play Maryland. I rewatched Iowa versus UCLA's game highlights, and I was watching intently the second half. And it's so interesting how time can pass and you can have a different vantage point, a different viewpoint than when you watch it like immediately or whatever the case may be. And I thought to myself, given the context of the game, Iowa was on the road. You know, their offense really was struggling. Maybe even still not as much as we've seen last year, but Brendan Sullivan was struggling in his second start as an Iowa Hawkeye quarterback. And Iowa's defense just could not get the stops. And this is not me saying that Iowa's defense is the reason that Iowa lost this game, because that's not entirely true. But it reminded me last year and really the last couple of years just how lucky we have been as Iowa fans to have had some of the Iowa defenses that we have had. Last year, I can think of multiple occasions, like one that comes right off the bat is the Nebraska game, because the gym I go to, there's a few Nebraska fans, so they always remind me of this game and how heartbreaking it was, where Iowa gets a stop. They get the interception. Ethan Hurkett gets the interception. It seemed so innocuous that the scheme that they were in, the coverage that they were in, but Phil Parker and that, or whoever it was, probably Phil Parker, saw something that they thought that they could capitalize on, and Ethan Hurkett drops back in coverage softly rather than going in an all-out blitz or whatever the case may be, and gets the interception. And it just reminded me of how, number one, how lucky we have been to have that just elite defenses that Iowa has had the last couple of years. But also, and this is probably the most important thing when talking about this season, is Iowa's defenses have really bailed Iowa out a lot. So many games, the Iowa defenses literally won the football game for the Iowa Hawkeyes and came up with crucial plays to will the Iowa Hawkeyes to victory. And so, anyways, bringing that back to this year, we just haven't had that. And it's not to say that Iowa's defense like needs this massive overhaul and there's these massive gaping holes on the Iowa defense and it needs to be done away with a quickness. That is absolutely not the case. Does Phil Parker need to revisit and look at the Iowa defense this year? Of course. Every year that needs to be done. And I do think probably due to Phil, and I've said this many times, I think because of Phil Parker's injury, he probably wasn't able to give the attention that he normally gives to the Iowa defense this offseason. So it's just interesting to see that because no matter how talented your team is, and I think for this Iowa team, if you look at the wins that they've had, they're obviously talented because every win that Iowa has, even against solid teams, Minnesota or decent teams, have been total butt whoopings, just beating the brakes off the opponent. Wisconsin, Minnesota. But even when you have a team of that caliber, you're still going to have at least two games where it's closer than it needs to be or should be. And you have to find a way to win those games and will a victory. In the last couple of years, Iowa has been really good at winning those games. Why? Because their defense was always making plays. And so I thought that that was going to be an interesting thing as a change of pace to open up this game preview with that. Now that we're over halfway through, probably more than three quarters over this season, I do think that that is something that this Iowa team has missed, and they miss it tremendously. Even though the Iowa offense has improved, they haven't improved enough for Iowa's defense to not have to make those plays. They still have to make those plays. You know, against UCLA, Iowa literally had two chances. And again, it's not the defense's fault. Okay. I have to say that 100%. But they did have two opportunities with under 5 minutes to go to get that needed stop, to get that needed turnover. And credit to UCLA for not giving it to them. And of course, Iowa's defense got good turnovers before the final 5 minutes in that game. But still, it was needed. And last year, they would have had it. They would have come up with a play, put Iowa in excellent field position to hammer it home. So lastly, before we officially look at Iowa versus Maryland, I understand, guys, that the excitement for the Iowa Hawkeye football team at this point in time is at an all-time low. I totally understand that. I feel the same because this season has absolutely been a letdown. I posted on Facebook that Iowa, at their best, I think they are an elite team at their best. When they are firing on all cylinders, they are a team that is 30 points better than the Wisconsins, the Minnesotas. They are that good at their best. And Wisconsin nearly almost beat the number one ranked Oregon Ducks. Now, did Oregon play their best game? Of course not. But still, that Iowa team did to Wisconsin what Oregon could not. The problem has been consistency. And I fully understand that I believe it myself, that this season is going to end up being the lost season, the season that could have been when we end up seeing all the guys that go to the NFL and the talent that this Iowa football team really did have. So I fully understand that, guys. But as a content creator, I still have to pump the content out. I'm here. That's the one thing I've learned making content for you guys is I have to be here, rain or shine, for better or worse, for richer, for poorer. I got to be here making the content. With that said, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let's get this channel to 2,000 subscribers. We're really marching towards that. At the very least, like, comment when you engage in the video by liking or commenting or even disliking the video. It does help the video in the algorithm. And without further ado, let's dive into this. Going to get my screen shared here. And here we go. So here is the Football Power Index. It gives Iowa a 74.2% chance to win this game on the road against Maryland. And again, I think and granted, Maryland's coming into this game 4-6. Iowa's coming into this game 6-4. Maryland is 1-6 in conference play. But I think that this speaks to what I've said for the last couple of weeks, which is last year, Iowa, if you look at their football power index, it was lower than what maybe their ranking was, or their win loss record was, because they were defying the stats, they were defying the numbers. This year, their power index is higher than maybe their record indicates. So I think that this is indicative of that. Um, Here are the season leaders. It's going to be interesting to see who starts this game for Iowa at quarterback. I don't think it's going to like play much of a difference. I've heard some people say that Iowa's going to go back to Cade McNamara, that they should go back to Cade McNamara. That is a load of garbage. This season is lost. Okay. Iowa is at this point just playing to improve their bowl record and to not have this season be a total loss when it comes to recruiting and, Kirk Ferentz win-loss record. Okay. They're playing for pride at this point. But Iowa needs to turn to next year. Cade McNamara is not going to be back. And this is a prime time or prime moment for Iowa to find out who they have in the current quarterbacks that they have on the roster and get it. Hell, I would say that they should turn to Marco Lainez if they could, just to see where he's at in his development. But unfortunately, he's injured, which long term, honestly, guys, that does concern me for Marco, because I am worried that this is going to affect his development. And, we'll see where he's at. But unfortunately, he's not in the conversation because he's injured. And this would be a possible moment that instead of Jackson Stratton going in there last week on the road, it could have been Marco Lainez. So, either way, Iowa, in my opinion, they cannot go to Cade McNamara. It's done. It's over. There's nothing left to play for. There is no reason to go back to Cade McNamara other than, Iowa being stubborn and saying, "Well, we believe that he gives us the best chance to win." That nonsense. Okay, Iowa can win this game with the quarterbacks that they have, not named Cade McNamara. So honestly, guys, I, I'm kind of interested to see what Iowa has in Jackson Stratton, the preferred walk-on, who at one time was a Washington commit out of the state of California. I detailed this going back in the offseason that I actually thought he was a really good pickup for Tim Lester at the preferred walk-on spot. So I'd be okay with Iowa going to him. He moves well. He's got excellent size. He's 6'5". I would like to see what Iowa has in him. Brendan Sullivan obviously has his drawbacks. He was totally frantic against UCLA. He was totally anxious in the pocket. He was unsure of himself. There were moments where he could have just tucked it and ran and gone for it, but he was very indecisive. So we'll see what happens. I think that again we'll see what the depth chart says. When at the time of recording this, the depth chart has not been updated. I think it'll be Brendan Sullivan if he's good to go, but if not, it very well might be Jackson Stratton. For Maryland, their leading quarterback, who actually has some decent numbers, is B. Edwards Jr. He has 2,855 passing yards, 15 touchdowns to 9 INTs. Rushing yards leader Caleb Johnson has 1,328 rush yards, 20 touchdowns. He, of course, is no longer the second leading rusher in the country, as he kind of had a down game against UCLA, but he still is top five in rush yards and top five in rushing touchdowns. I think he's actually tied for third or fourth in rush yards. And then for Maryland, their leading rusher is R. Hemby, who has 524 yards, 6 touchdowns, which actually may not be that bad if they have another rusher that's got like 400 yards. It's just Caleb Johnson is having a magnificent season this year. So anything short of that just seems so far away, so distant. Receiving leaders, Jacob Gill has 336 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's now Iowa's leading receiver. And for Maryland, they have T. Felton, who has 1,040 yards, 7 touchdowns. This is definitely something to keep an eye out for, as I have told you guys and touched upon the fact that Phil Parker's defenses tend to struggle against wide receivers that are above average to elite. And this kid already having 1,000 yards, and it's not even the end of the regular season yet. He's obviously an above average wide receiver. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. The last five for Iowa here, of course, they lost on the road to UCLA 20-17. And they lost on the road to Michigan State 32-20. They have not been good on the road this year. Let's see. I think all of their losses, except for Iowa State, have been on the road. The only road victory that they've had that was a solid victory was Minnesota. They lost on the road to Ohio State. They lost on the road to Michigan State, and on the road to UCLA. Maryland lost most recently to Rutgers at home 31-17. They lost to Oregon 39-18. They lost to Minnesota 48-23. They beat USC 29-28, and they lost to Northwestern 37-10. Let's see what the betting odds are. Iowa is a 6.5-point favorite. With the over under being 46 and a half. Sorry, guys. 46 and a half. Let's look at the team stats here. This is total defense. Maryland checks in at 77. And let's go back, actually. They're giving up 378.1 yards a game. And Iowa checks in at 25th, which would be their lowest total in multiple years. I mean, it's still good. It's still what I would categorize as good. Elite is, I would say, top 15. Elite in any statistical category is top 15, maybe top 20. But they're still good. They're giving up 320 yards per game. Next, we have total offense. Iowa is 101st. But I did want to tell you guys, just to highlight the improvement that Iowa has had under Tim Lester. And again, how much of it is the run game and how much of it is Tim Lester? Is the run game improved because of Tim Lester, or is it just improved because Iowa has a veteran offensive line and they have Caleb Johnson? We won't know until next year. But they are averaging 347 yards per game. Yes, 101 is still low, and yes, that is still below average as far as the numbers go. But last year, that is a marked improvement, in which Iowa was last, 133rd in total offense, and they were averaging 234 yards per game. Iowa is now averaging, I believe, 130 more yards per game than they were last year. So 347 to 234. So actually 113 more yards per game. So not bad. Definitely a marked improvement. And then Maryland, I would say, is a average to above average offense. They are 44th. They're averaging 421.2 yards per game. Next, we have scoring defense. Iowa checks in at 14th. They are giving up 18.2 points per game. And let's see where I bet Maryland is page 3, if I had to guess. Let's see. Maryland. Huh. No, they might be page 2. Maybe they're even page 1. Let's see. 97th, and they are giving up 29.2 points per game. And then last, we have scoring offense. Let's see. Maryland, I believe, is page dose. And this is another area that Iowa has improved. Iowa is 56th in scoring offense, right at like slightly below average to like right at the average mark, I'd say. They're averaging 29.4 points per game. But again, it's a marked improvement from last year. You look at Maryland, who has all those yards. They're way better than Iowa as far as yards go, but they are 85th in scoring offense, averaging 26.4. To me, the more important number is always the scoring offense. That's because at the end of the day, what matters the most is putting points on the board. So, all right, guys. Last but not least, to keep this short and sweet, I'm going to give you guys my game prediction and my analysis. The biggest thing that I'm looking for is who is going to be Iowa's quarterback. We'll see if Luke Lachey is back. That guy just really has struggled with injuries the last 2 years. He's missed a lot of time. I actually do think I put this on my Facebook page just for what it's worth, and maybe I'll do a video on it down the line. All the players who were signed in the 2020 recruiting class have an extra year of eligibility with the COVID year. And I believe Luke Lachey is part of that. But at the end of the day, regardless of who the Iowa quarterback is, I think Iowa has what it needs to win this game. Because at the end of the day, their number one skill set offensively is running the football. So I just want to see who they have on the roster that's healthy. I want to see what they're made of, what they have to offer for next year, what we're working with for next year. That's the biggest thing. But I'm gonna pick the Iowa Hawkeyes to win this game. I'll say 25-15. But again, Iowa has struggled on the road. And the good news is that they did have a bye week coming into this game. But again, they're heading across the country. And yes, they have not done well on the road, minus the game against Minnesota, which really was not that far of a flight for them. So that's going to be something to monitor. Does their road woes continue against Maryland? If they lost this game, man, that would be sorry, Maryland fans, but if Iowa loses this game, it will be a travesty. So, but crazier things have happened in college sports. So I'll go 25-15. I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa hits the 30 mark, and I also wouldn't be surprised if Iowa has this game closer than it should be, given their road woes and their terrible inconsistencies this year. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to smash that subscribe button, like, comment, share. You guys know the drill. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow in facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. I love you, Hawk fans. Hang in there. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.